What is up, my beautiful people? Welcome to yet again another episode of the Pivot Mindset Podcast. My name is Justin. I'm your host, and welcome to the Pivot. We believe here that life is all about the pivot, and those who decide to make the pivots decide to become successful. We believe that pivoting and being successful are synonymous, that it is nearly impossible to change your life and to change your circumstances without making life's pivots. And that's what this whole podcast is about, is helping people, including myself, make the life's pivots and making those adjustments. Just some quick housekeeping, as always, guys. I ask that you continue, if you're listening to this podcast for the very first time and you haven't yet, because everybody else is doing it, make sure you leave this podcast a rating and review. I appreciate just the consistency that you guys have had with showing up for this podcast. I recently was looking at the podcast analytics and the podcast stats, and I was amazed at where the growth has happened and gone for this podcast. We surpassed, I believe it was 350 or 300, something around there, views in a week. And that was a larger number than we normally see. So last week was 300-ish views. I think, 350 views in a week. Normally we're somewhere around 100 views per week. So the podcast, in my estimation, absolutely exploded. To me, the podcast went viral. The podcast absolutely went viral in our world, in our estimation. And I'm really starting to lean into the reality of where I am and just leaning into where this podcast is. What I know is that all big things started small. And, the Bible talks about to not despise small beginnings. And, I am trying to be more intentional about not despising the small beginnings. And I actually just got the podcast topic. So, y'all, I didn't know what I was going to talk about in this episode, but I just said I'm going to just crack the camera, crack the mic on, and I'm going to just start talking. And God, give me whatever you want the people to hear. And I believe I want to talk about in this episode, I'm giving it to you live. I want to talk about how to not despise small beginnings and why small beginnings are really important. So, as I mentioned, I've been really leaning into not despising my small beginnings. There's going to be a time in life that you're going to remember and even celebrate when things were so small. And, go with me on this journey, because I'm sure you guys have done this or do this currently. I'm 30 years old now, and I remember when I was in high school and, life was so simple, right? The biggest, most traumatic thing that was happening to me in high school was, breaking up with a girlfriend or losing a football game or, not leaving my money at home so I couldn't buy pizza at school, right? Those were my problems. Those were the issues. It was, man, I didn't get to buy the pair of shoes that I wanted, or I didn't get what I wanted for Christmas. Those were my issues. Those were my problems. Those were the challenges that I had. And, if I could go back, right, I almost envy that guy, right? I almost envy the 17-year-old, 16-year-old Justin, who life was just so simple and he didn't have a lot going on, and life wasn't so important, and he didn't have a family, and he didn't have bills, and he didn't have children, and he wasn't trying to create and build his legacy, right? And so if we really be honest with ourselves, a lot of the times we try to speed through life to get to the end. And you keep doing that, you'll eventually find your way at the end of your life without really being present with where you were. And a part of me being present is leaning into the small beginnings. When you accomplish anything, I think one of the hardest things there is to do is go back to zero. A lot of you may have experienced this before, but it's when you may be in a different, maybe you're in an area in business, and maybe you're at the top of your class. Maybe you're at the top of your game. But if you continue to strive, you're going to eventually be at the bottom in a new arena. It's like for me when I played high school football and I was at the top of my game. I was in the newspaper. I made all city. I was the best. If anybody on my team is listening to this, I would call myself the best defensive back on my team. I would quite frankly call myself the best defensive back in the city. But when I went to college, I was the worst defensive back on the team, right? You start back at zero. And I had to learn how to win at a new level. And so, Justin, you're saying, like, what does this have to do with small beginnings? What I'm saying is that I believe so often, I know me personally can get carried away with always focusing on the future that I don't celebrate the small beginnings. I don't celebrate the thing being small. And there's so much power and presence and purity and love when the thing is small that I think we sometimes gloss over. And if I can encourage you in any way in this episode, that would be to not look over and to not talk down on your small beginning. And here's where I'm at right now is I really want to be more intentional about making sure that I do not look over or talk down my small beginnings. The small beginnings is really the piece of really understanding if your love, your heart, and your desire is in it. I believe that God uses small beginnings to know if it can eventually become big. Because if you don't fall in love with the thing when it's small, admit that you really didn't love the thing. Because when it's small, you probably are getting less money from it. You're probably getting less traction from it. You're probably getting less attention from it. We are headed to episode 50. I think this is episode 46, 47, something like that, right? I already know when this podcast hits episode 200, episode 300, episode 1000, I'm going to look back at this episode like, man, I remember when I was recording episode 45. I remember when I was recording episode 46. I remember when I just started that podcast. I remember the first year of that podcast and how fun it was and how I was trying something new. And when the thing becomes big, I'm going to envy the version of me that sits here and that you guys listen to right now. And so when I get down the path and I'm going to envy the person that's here right now, why don't I just find a way to be more present and enjoy the experience and enjoy me showing up, enjoying being a part of the process of turning something from nothing into something and building something. And so, sometimes for me, that means that you got to be transparent with where you are. Do not despise the small beginnings. I believe it's easy to despise the small beginnings also when you don't have vision for the finish line or for it becoming big. It's easy to despise the small beginning when you don't have vision for it being big. And so you try to placate and act like the small thing is a problem because you want the big thing so fast. But I believe God wants us to truly understand the stewardship that's built in truly owning the small thing. And so I could stand here before you and say, man, this podcast, I'll be blessed if this podcast does 150 listens this week. Right? Like I'm not the biggest podcast in the world. Obviously, you guys know that. We're just starting this podcast out. And so I want to encourage you, man, to some of you might be on the fence right now when it comes to wanting to start something new in your life. And you might be on the fence because you're afraid at starting back at zero. You're afraid at sucking again. You're afraid that you're used to always being in your comfort zone and you're used to always working in your strengths, that you're going to now start something and it's actually going to force you to start back at zero. But what I'm here to tell you is that when it comes to getting to those next phases and the next step in life, everybody has to go through the process of starting back at zero. Your favorite athlete, every single year, they have a new season. And they may have won a championship last year, but they've got to start back at zero. You might have somebody that's in fitness, and you might be in a fitness goal, and maybe you want to lose 10 pounds. But once you lose the 10 pounds, maybe you might not. Now you might have a new goal, and maybe you want to get abs, or maybe you want to start to build muscle, or whatever that is. You got to start back at zero. And so I believe if you can find a way to get more comfortable with the smallness of what you're doing, that you would truly, one, test that if what you're doing is really that important to you. Do you want and enjoy what you're doing, or do you only enjoy the results that are on the opposite end of it? If you only enjoy the results that are on the opposite end of it, I promise you that you will not have the endurance necessary to do the work to get you to the results that you actually desire. I believe that it is a challenge to do anything that's completely outside of your comfort zone and anything that's completely new. And so when it comes to developing yourself, you've got to have a love for it. You've got to have some fight for it. You've got to have really some passion to leverage to help you get through those low moments, to help you get through the things and the times that it's not sexy, right? It's kind of the story where people talk about, right, how somebody took 10 years to become an overnight success. No, you just finally caught me, right? You just finally caught on. You just finally connected with me, but I've been doing this thing for 10 plus years, right? And so I want you to be okay with obscurity for now, right? And, can you put your head down and just be thankful for the small? Can you celebrate the 5 views? Can you celebrate when only one person gives your video a thumbs up? Can you celebrate the 5 likes on your post? Can you celebrate you setting up a webinar and only one person joining? Can you celebrate the small beginnings? And I know for me personally, a couple things that get in the way of me leaning into and being okay with small beginnings is comparison. So, and I'm using a lot of Bible in this podcast today, but the Bible talks about how comparison is the thief of joy. That if you want to find a way to get joy out of your life, compare yourself to somebody. That is one of the best ways to get joy out of your life, is to find something or someone to compare yourself to. And so if comparison is the thief of joy, I've got to find a way to live a life doing the complete opposite, because I don't want joy stolen from me. I want joy given to me. And so if I want to have joy, and if I want to be, fired up and lit up behind what I'm doing, I've got to make sure that I don't compare myself and what I'm doing to anybody else's. And so one of the reasons why it's tough, it could be tough for me to enjoy the small beginning, is because I can see somebody else at a different place in their journey. And, I could see, a lot of you know that I do coaching, and I'm a mindset coach, and I'm a business coach. And I may see somebody who's maybe started coaching after I did, and maybe they have a bigger business than I do. And I can look at that and say, man, I wish I had that, right? And I can stop really leaning to what I've got right here in front of me. I could really stop honoring and sanctifying the things that I've got in front of me. And so I believe one of the best ways to honor the small is to be okay with putting the blinders on and stop comparing yourself to other people. Only person that you should be comparing truly yourself to, if you want to find a way and to find something to compare to, is you should be comparing yourself to yourself. You should be comparing today to last year. You should be comparing today to 5 years ago. You should be comparing your post today from your post yesterday. You should be comparing your webinar today from your webinar 5 years ago, right? And I think if we could finally be okay with living in our own space and being in our own zone, and not finding something to always envy by somebody else and trying to covet what somebody else has, I believe you can celebrate your smallness. You could celebrate, man, I did a webinar for the very first time and I only had 5 people on it, but man, it was so good. I learned a lot. I connected with 5 new people. Those 5 people really helped me. I helped them the best that I could. I served them the best that I could, right? And it's like leaning into the smallness. Here's another one. I think that it's hard for people to enjoy and embrace the small things because they are not really in love with the thing that they're doing. For me personally, I learned this very easily with my children. So if any of you don't know, I've got 2 children, Zane and Zara. Got a boy and a girl. My oldest son is Zane and my daughter is Zara. And I notice in them that they're young, right? They're kids. My son is 5, my daughter's 3. And I, as a father, understand this very well because I can look at them for where they are and just love them for where they are. I do not compare my 5-year-old son to a 20-year-old man and say, come on, man, I wish you were that. And I don't see a 20-year-old man and say, go home to my kid and say, man, I love you less, right? I just don't do that. I don't look at my daughter and look at a 25-year-old young lady and say, man, come on, Zara, why can't you be like her? Why? Because I've clearly have understood to love the child for where they are, and I know that it takes time to develop into that person, and we can get it from a physical life perspective because we know that it takes time to age, right? And the older you get, hopefully the more wiser you get. And so I won't expect my daughter to be able to drive a car right now because she can barely buckle herself into her car seat, right? Because she's 3. But there comes a time when she's 16 and 17 years old where, and it blows my mind to even think about this, right? But I'm going to be sitting on the passenger side and I'm saying, all right, Zara, like 10 and 2, put the car in reverse and let's go, right? So if you can understand that from a natural standpoint, and when it comes to raising children, or when it comes to being first person, being on a job and starting a new job, or when it comes to gardening and planting a seed and knowing that you got to just keep watering that seed and you're not going to get upset at the tree or the green beans or the watermelon, whatever you're growing, you're not going to get upset at that because you know that thing takes watering. It's going to take days. It's going to take sunlight. It's going to take fertilizer. It's going to take a lot of things to get that thing to grow to what you really want it to be. And so what if you just decided today to be more grateful than you ever have about the thing that's small right now? Come on, y'all. What if you decided today to be the most grateful for the small thing and where it is right now? More grateful than you've ever been before. How could you display the greatest gratitude for every single thing that's small in your life? And I believe that if you take care of the small things, and if you honor the small things, and if you serve the small things, and if you love the small things, the Bible talks about that God will make you ruler over many. And I believe that those small things will continually grow. And what will grow is the stuff that you feed, and it's the stuff that you water, it's the stuff that you love on. And if you really love the small thing enough, that small thing would eventually get big. If you love it enough, you'll be able to tell more people about it. If you love it enough, you'll be able to get in front of more hands. If you love it enough, you will develop the discipline necessary to show up each and every day for the thing that's small, not because you want it to only get big, but because you love the thing for where it is. I love my son for where he is. I don't love him for being a 15-year-old. I love him for being a 5-year-old. And I would never ask my son at the age of 5 to be a 15-year-old boy. The same thing is true with what you're doing. It could be a podcast. It could be your social media. It could be a business for you. It could be a relationship for you. It could be a job. Whatever it is, there could be an area in your life, and it's small. It could be your bank account. You might be despising the small amount of money that you've got in your bank account right now. You might got $12.32 in that joint. Do not despise the $12.32 that you have in your bank account, because I promise you that if you just give praise for the $12.32 that's there, and that you continually build the discipline to just get it to $13, to get it to $15, to get it to $25, you'll look up and the savings will be at $100. You'll put the discipline and you'll be like, man, I'm so thankful that I got my first $100. Next thing you look up, you'll see your savings at kind of $150. You'll look up 5 years later and you'll be like, man, I got $25,000 in the bank. You'll look up 10 years later, man, I got $350,000 in whatever, right? You got to enjoy the small beginnings. And so if I can encourage you in anything today, I just want you to lean into the things that are small in your life. And I know the world that we live in always wants you to just only celebrate the big wins, only celebrate the big things. But if you can find a way to be extremely grateful for all the small things, I promise you that you will find a way to truly lean into and enjoy the present moment for where it is. Because one day you're going to look up and wish that you were where you currently are right now. And what better way to honor the future you than to enjoy the present blessings that are currently sitting in your hand? All right. And so that's all I got for you today. Listen, lean into the small things. I want you guys to embrace the small things and truly learn to love where you are and know that always the best is yet to come. But it won't be because you're only celebrating the big things, but it'll be because you've honored and sanctified the things that are small in your life. All right. So that's all I got for you in this video. Remember to give this podcast a rating and review. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up. If you're listening to this on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, feel free to give this podcast a 5-star rating. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please share this with your friends. If there's anybody, if you're getting any value from this podcast, please share it with anybody that you know, anybody that you love, that you'd love for them to be a part of this pivot mindset community. I'd love to have them, and we'd love to welcome them into this community. All right. And so remember, life is all about the pivots, and those who decide to make the pivots decide to become successful. Peace.